A very good morning. I was about to say evening. I'm so used to being on air in the evening. I am a night owl, but I have to go to London later today, and I've had to come to you a bit earlier than I normally would. Now, my friends, I hope I've caught you doing incredibly well. What a lot of treachery is going on Downing Street this morning. The Keir Starmer's government, by the way, a lot of people have said to me for quite some time now that this government would not last till 2029. And I have said, as much as I would like that to happen, that I believe they will cling on as socialists do. They're like cockroaches. You cannot get rid of them even with a nuclear missile. They will cling on to power by whatever tools necessary. But I actually think that this morning has changed everything. Because they told us, didn't they, that the grown-ups were back in charge. They told us that a new era of serious government was upon us after years of Tory negligence. And what have we got? Just 18 months in. Let's not forget, it took the Tories over a decade to get as tired, as toxic, and as self-obsessed as this, fighting like rats in a sack. This Labour government, this shower of sugar, has managed it in less than 2 years. The circus has definitely not left town. The circus might have changed, but the clowns, my friends, have very much stuck around. This isn't just a government in the doldrums, it's a government in the state of total systemic collapse. And this week, it's all spectacularly come crashing down. We need to start with the government themselves. They're not governing, right? They're in a briefing war with a full-blown circular firing squad aiming squarely at the Prime Minister. Keir Starmer's own team in number 10, led by his right-hand man, the Irish Morgan McSweeney, decided that it was a brilliant idea to launch a preemptive strike against Health Secretary Wes Streeting, who's on the Blairite wing of the party. Now, Streeting has said there, as you can see on screen, attack the toxic culture in number 10 Downing Street. Now, this was a line parroted by the now deputy leader of the Labour Party, Lucy Powell, when she was running for election, because she was running on a ticket of being opposed to Starmer. So unpopular is the Prime Minister, not just in our country, but also within the Labour Party itself, within their membership grassroots activist base. So they accused Wes Streeting this morning, number 10, of plotting a coup. And in doing so, they exposed how terrified and spectacularly useless they actually are. Now, Wes Streeting was on the telly round this morning, and he didn't just deny it. As I say, he slammed that toxic culture in Starmer's number 10. He called for sackings within number 10. This is the health secretary, the biggest part of government spending in that cabinet. The health secretary saying there needs to be sackings within number 10 Downing Street. They're openly at each other's throats. I thought we'd already had Halloween, but here is Wes Streeting sharpening his blade. Number 10's plan to stifle dissent has blown up in their faces. They're now in a flat-out panic, and they're trying to walk it back. You know, Starmer must be in number 10 right now, doing a Michael Jackson moonwalk. But we need to actually look at what they have ultimately done. They've said that they're going to try and walk this back. So number 10 have said they're not deliberately stirring things up, and Guido report number 10 attempts to walk back the anti-Streeting briefing campaign because they've realised they've let the genie out the bottle, and now that there is the prospect of a campaign against the Prime Minister having legs, genuine legs, a viable chance overthrowing Keir Starmer, they've realised that shit has hit the fan. I'm sorry for swearing so early on a Wednesday morning. But they say they're not deliberately stirring things up. They say instead they are reactively responding. Pathetic. They've lost control. We can all see it. We all know it. They are a government in name only. We've seen this play out with the Tories. It's playing out in hyperspeed with the Labour Party. And the man at the centre of it is indeed Wes Streeting. He was sent out this morning to actually attempt to put out the fire. And instead, I would argue, he poured petrol on it. I woke up this morning listening to the radio and I turned over in my bed and I thought, wow, this is it, my friends. This is it. I was wrong. This government is collapsing. It's fallen. The moment that I believe the mask didn't just slip, but it was ripped off, came here. Have a watch at this. So this is Wes on the BBC's breakfast show this morning.
Across the country and put you under a bit of pressure. I mean, they clearly are worried about a leadership challenge. Are you saying I would never stand against Keir Starmer?
Yeah, I'm not doing that. And also,
you're not doing what? You're not standing.
I'm not challenging the Prime Minister. I'm not standing against him. I'm not doing any of the things that some silly briefers said overnight. As for pressure, I'll be honest, this silly briefing's water off a duck's back. We've seen this before against other cabinet colleagues. I think our deputy Lucy Powell, was absolutely right about that toxic culture that needs to change. I don't think these people are speaking for the Prime Minister. I don't think this is the sort of behaviour he expects from people who work for him and for the government. So on all that, I'm not worried. The only pressure I feel sat here this morning is the pressure to make sure we keep our promises to the public, we turn our NHS around, and we make sure the National Health Service is always there for all of us when we need it, as a publicly funded public service free at the point of use. That is the only pressure I feel.
Of course, and that's what we, as you say, we've talked about the NHS and what you're doing on the NHS. I'm interested that you said that you're not standing against him. My question was, would you ever stand against Keir Starmer in future?
I cannot see circumstances in which I would do that to our Prime Minister. And look, the thing I've said about the Prime...
There we are. Did you hear that? I'm not challenging the Prime Minister. I'm not standing against him. But the presenter goes in. My question was, would you ever stand against Keir Starmer in the future? And the answer ought to tell you everything. He says, I cannot see circumstances in which I would do that to our Prime Minister. That is categorically not a no. That is the most polished, slippery, Blairite student union president answer in history. I cannot see the circumstances. That's politician speak for, well, the stars haven't quite aligned yet, but give us a chance and I'll kick him up the arse and get him out of number 10. He didn't just fail to deny it, he advertised his ambition to the entire country and, crucially, to the Labour Party members and, even more crucially, to the Labour Party's politicians, those elected in Parliament right now. And what a surprise! What a surprise! Who could have possibly guessed this? Guess what launched yesterday? A Wes for Leader website. WesForLeader.com was registered yesterday. Now, his team, of course, are straight out of the trap saying that this is just mischief-making, but that looks like a pretty official Labour Party branding to me. But it's the modern equivalent, truly, of leaving your leadership manifesto in a taxi and hoping that the cabbie takes a few sly pics. It's an absolute classic. I can smell a rat. I really can. So why is this all happening now? Why are they in a blind panic now? It'll be obvious to many of you, but it's because they're broke. They're broken. They've failed on absolutely everything that they promised. You know, you've got Telegraph leaders now actually actively warning that the Labour Party, the Labour government, will simply not survive till 2029. And I'm coming round to that view. I really am. They are in office, but they are not in power, despite having an overwhelming majority government. They tried welfare reform. Their backbenchers rebelled against it. That's despite the fact that when you look at the stats around welfare, that it is quite frankly out of control. The rate at which the number of people who are claiming universal credit, who are on incapacity benefits, has gone from 1 million in 2021 to 4 million in 2025. That's not we cannot go on like this. We cannot function like this. And of course, Rachel Reeves, who has a negative 48% trust rating on the economy, is about to commit the ultimate betrayal. The shameless decision that I would argue proves that they're finished is the breaking of their one single ironclad manifesto promise. It's about as ironclad as Britain's sodden borders. They're coming to raise your income tax. So you go out to work, you're paying for the extra millions of people who are on incapacity benefits, universal credit. Do you really believe that there are all of a sudden extra millions of people who simply cannot get a job or go into work? I don't believe that. I'm sorry. I'll get complaints once again saying that I'm campaigning a charge against disabled people. I'm absolutely not doing that. I just do not believe that between 2021 and 2025, there are all of a sudden millions of people who cannot countenance getting a job. They lied to get into power, and now they're coming to pay for their incompetence. They're coming to you to pay for their incompetence. And while they're plotting to raise your taxes, this is the real world cost of their high tax, low growth, socialist project. The economy is totally collapsing. Real businesses are shutting up shop. Real people's livelihoods are being destroyed because they're being taxed into oblivion by a government that has absolutely no clue on how to create wealth. It only knows about the expansion of the state, and that is a road to collapse and failure. But it's not just incompetence, right? It's their values. It's who they truly serve as a government, as a politician, as a group. While they're picking your pocket, they're also failing quite catastrophically in their most basic fundamental duty. And that is their duty to protect our own citizens. Because have a look at this particular story. So, yesterday, the government won its appeal to keep housing migrants in the Epping Hotel. Now, the Epping Hotel, of course, was the epicenter of the Pink Ladies, those who were gathering in pink to campaign in favour of the protection of women and girls, something that you would strongly believe that every political party would be in favour of in Britain. But the local council, the actual people who live there, fought the government tooth and nail. And the wicked busybodies in the High Court sided with the Home Office in their structured surrender. It is a betrayal of the British public. This is the state of Starmer's Britain, right? A taxpayer-funded flophouse for boat jumpers being prioritised over the safety and the will of the local community in Epping. The irony is utterly savage. Protect our girls. And their response is to say the hotel can stay. What a joke, right? What a joke. This is the man who takes the knee to movements like Black Lives Matter, and now he takes the knee to illegals over our own women and girls. And the problem is only getting worse. The French police, we're paying the French hundreds of millions of pounds, 480 million plus another 100 million from Starmer recently for this so-called deal. Now, what are we getting from this deal? Well, the French are supposed to be stopping the boats. There are supposed to be far fewer boats as a consequence of this additional bung of hundreds of millions of pounds. But the smugglers are literally using the French police, who just stand there and watch like some, I don't know, sordid window in Amsterdam, as an advertisement for their services. Starmer's groundbreaking deal has actually returned a grand total of 94 people. Now, last weekend alone, there were nearly 2,000 people that crossed the English Channel. We're returning 0.5% of the problem. 0.5%. That isn't even a statistic worth talking about. This isn't a government, it's a national embarrassment, and a public safety risk. So you pull these strands all together, and what we have here is a government at war with itself. It's a prime minister so very weak that he feels the need to actually campaign against his own cabinet, and a health secretary who's openly measuring the curtains for number 10 Downing Street. Perhaps Lord Ali will give it a makeover for him. We've got a broken economy, we've got a shameless tax betrayal, we've got a border policy that consists of paying the French to wave the boats through, like Marie Antoinette. The polling is a bloodbath. Labour is at 15 to 20%, depending on what poll you look at. Reform is over 30%. More than half the country, including a third of their own Labour voters, by the way, want Starmer to resign. I'm strongly, as I say, I've changed my mind. This government will not last till 2029. At this rate, they'll be lucky to make it after May, when the local elections, if they allow them to go ahead in certain places, that is, will be an utter bloodbath. This isn't a drill, my friends. This is the moment of collapse. It is like my attempts at bacon. It won't rise. And this is why, my friends, I'll be going to London later on today, and I'll be making the case that Reform UK has to be ready. The public is crying out for a patriotic, plain speaking, common sense alternative that actually stands up and champions their interests, their values, their safety, their protection, their women, their girls, their communities, their country. This circus is about to end, and Reform UK has to be ready to step in and plug the gap left by this rotten Labour government. My view, my friends. Mika says, I love Darren Grimes. Thank you very much, Mika. And Xlix says, let's take back tomorrow. I agree. Let's take it back. One comment says, France is guilty of rubbing in the faces of British veterans by letting invaders leave their shores. Yeah, especially, they came on Remembrance Day. They came over on boats on Remembrance Day. Oh, not for you to know actually has a counter narrative. I don't want Tuti Akia to step down as leader. He's doing a great job keeping Labour unpopular. I'm worried someone like Wes appearing more palatable to the normie voters. Well, the thing is not for you to know. I don't know if the Labour membership would actually vote for Wes because he's probably considered a little bit too Blairite, a little bit too right. I was going to say right wing. You know what I mean? Somewhere to the right on the Labour Party front. And I'm not sure he would win, actually. So that's one to keep an eye out on. Oh, get rid of Starmer and inherit Mahmood, Shabana Mahmood as Prime Minister. Alex says, great to see Darren back on Reason. Thank you very much, Alex. Chloe is phenomenal, I know. And it's a pity I'm not Chloe because she is indeed beautiful, intelligent, and all of the rest of it. Now, Gary says, I disagree. Starmer will be here this time next year. Honestly, I am not convinced. Malk says, it's an abysmal affair. So glad for media like yours that shine a light on this sugar show. He didn't say sugar, but I'll let you guess what he said. Now, okay. We need to actually hit that like button and subscribe if you haven't already, by the way, because it really does help the channel and get our message out there. Now, we need to talk about something else that's collapsing, like my attempts at bakery. I need to take you back to the BBC. So, the BBC, that's Tim Davie on the screen there now. Tim Davie is the Director General of the BBC, and he's just resigned. So, as Alison Pearson of The Telegraph calls it, the British Brainwashing Corporation. And she's done a phenomenal job at exposing them. Well, they're having a total existential meltdown. And I think actually it's a glorious thing to watch. For years and years, we've been the ones pointing out the obvious. You and I, my friends, we've said that the the BBC and the Labour Party are a hotbed of liberal left woke bias. And for years, they've patted us on the head and said, be a good dear, pay your licence fee, sod off. Sorry, I shouldn't do that, should I? For years, right, they've called us conspiracy theorists. They've called us far right. They've called us transphobic. They've called us racist. And now the receipts are in. That whistleblower dossier in full glory has put the BBC spiralling into full-blown panic. This isn't a fall from grace. This is an unmasking of the entire edifice of the morally bankrupt license fee model and the broadcaster that sits in front of it. We need to start with the crime itself. They didn't just get caught with a mistake, did they? They got caught out entirely. They were so blinded by their own Trump derangement syndrome that they resorted to Richard Madeley, of all people, calling them lousy, bent, dishonest journalism. Before I play that clip, the same people that edited, by the way, the Panorama programme in which that Trump clip selectively clipped together to make it look like he was inciting violence, have approached me, have approached other people in Reform to produce a documentary on the rise of Reform UK. We have pulled out of that documentary from the BBC. We will not work with people that, quite frankly, call journalism. They ain't journalists, they're activists. This was activism. This was an act of complete and utter deception, fraud, and activism. It is not journalism, and Reform UK will not have any participation in such a totally corruptible production company working alongside the BBC. But don't take my word for it, right? Watch the moment when the liberal mindset was actually exposed live on Good Morning Britain, and Kevin Maguire of the Daily Mirror sort of floundered like a fish out of water, trying to actually come up with a retort to the challenge by Richard Madeley.
Now, I am no defender of Trump, but I'm no defender of lousy, bent journalism either. And I'm sorry, that Panorama documentary was lousy, bent, dishonest journalism. And we should all be ashamed of it.
Trump was a defender of the Proud Boys and white supremacists.
You're ignoring the facts, Kevin.
You were taking, right? You were taking a 12 to 15 second clip in a full programme.
Very telling
in a full
clip.
programme that was broadcast a year ago, and I'm not aware of any big public complaints about it.
No, because it played for our journalists.
3.5 years
we all
previously,
think that Trump
and ignoring all the other evidence.
The reason that there were no complaints...
They should not.
The reason there were no complaints about that edit were because people didn't spot it. And the reason they didn't spot it was because we all, mostly, think that Trump did incite violence on Capitol Hill. So to see that edit simply confirmed our prejudice.
We're talking about an error of judgment. I mean,
Massive.
you call it a lie. And I would say they were doing it probably for dramatic effect, and they shouldn't have done it.
Yeah.
Look, Richard Madeley there, Trump did not incite violence on January 6th. But Richard Madeley is right that they had the narrative in their head, their liberal lefty bias that guides the BBC. That is their raison d'etre. That actually, the fact of the matter is, they knew what they wanted to portray to the British public, and they signed, sealed, and delivered a selection of selective clips that painted that to their public. And anyone watching it would have come away with the view that actually Trump did incite violence. But Madeley's reply, the reason there were no complaints is because people didn't spot it, because we all mostly think that Trump did incite violence. To see that edit simply confirms prejudice. So while I disagree with him on Trump inciting violence, I agree with him on confirming their own prejudice, their own biases. Bingo, right? That is what it's all about. This is the definition of institutional bias. Their own liberal prejudice is so very ingrained within the psyche of the BBC that they didn't even see the lie. It just feels all so true to them. This is what they believe. So the cover-up was the story, right? But it gets worse because this wasn't just a one-off error. It was a cover-up. They knew about it for a year. And when you get caught, you're supposed to apologise. And even the Labour Prime Minister, who called Gillian Duffy a bigoted woman back in 2010, useless man that he was, has actually, well, I'm afraid, agreed with everything that I just said. Everything that I just said. Gordon Brown, even a broken clock, my friends, is right twice a day.
I think the problem that the BBC has had is this happened a year ago. And an apology should have been made instantly. If a mistake has been made, you've got to apologise instantly. And then I don't think Tim Davie or the head of news would have had to resign, because they would have corrected the mistake immediately. It went unreported, unacknowledged, unapologised for. And I think that is where trust becomes an issue.
So an apology should have been made instantly, and he's right there. It went unapologised for. This is when trust dies, because the cover-up in action played out in full force. And you only have to watch the liberal left media in their hysteria. The former BBC cover girl, Emily Maitlis, on the so-called news agents, more like the propaganda agents, actually came out and said that the likes of me, the likes of Gordon Brown, the likes of Richard Madeley are all wrong, and that there isn't an institutional bias against Trump on the Beeb.
My point is that when Michael Prescott, who is the external advisor who had been advising the BBC on impartiality, wrote his dossier, which we now know was leaked to the Daily Telegraph, and in it he said the programme materially misled viewers, I think you have to step back. I think you have to really step back. And actually, I've read that dossier in full now, and it is not very obvious that he is an independent, impartial advisor.
You know, for 4 years, I covered the Trump first term as the BBC's North American.
Because he told the truth.
Our guiding light was be very careful and then be very bold. So when you've got firm judgments to make them, but do them on the most solid of foundations. You do not edit two different clips together. Now, why didn't the BBC apologise last week for it? And that's the fascinating bit of politics that's gone on here. There is a benign explanation that Samir Shah, the chairman, felt his first duty was to write to the DCMS chair, which seems to me if that's true, what a miscalculation. It was obvious that Trump was going to seize on it, and Caroline Leavitt, the White House spokesperson, would leap on it. And sure enough, they have. The more sinister explanation, and this is, I think, gets to the heart of where the BBC is now, is that this was a battle between those on the board who wanted more than just an apology, a whoopsie-daisy, that was a bad edit, but who wanted a sort of surrender document. They wanted to say, we've made a mistake here, and we do have a problem with impartiality in the BBC structurally. And that is something that BBC news bosses absolutely flatly reject, including Deborah Tenness this morning when she was walking into the building for perhaps her last time.
I feel like I've been living in a parallel universe.
Oh, God, gets worse.
Gets worse. The hysteria over this story, whipped up by commercial organisations, newspapers, MAGA, the rest of it, the sort of hard-right online ecosystem that we talk about all the time, all that have an agenda, is something to behold. That edit in question, John, you're right, it was a mistake. It was clearly misjudged, but the idea that it is an example of institutional bias against Trump is absurd.
It's not absurd at all. What an unbelievable clip, right? In one breath, they admit the external independent audit that took place that said the BBC materially misled its viewers. They admit that there was an internal battle because BBC bosses wanted to ignore the structural problem with impartiality, but they blame the hard right. They blame MAGA. The board has pointed out the blatant systemic bias within the BBC. And in the same breath, this harem of hysterical lefty commentators dismiss the whole thing as our hysteria. As our hysteria. They say that the idea of institutional bias is absurd. So they admit to the cover-up. And then they say that it's the hard right that are calling for the BBC to apologise. I've just showed you Gordon Brown said it. I've just showed you Richard Madeley said it. They accuse us of getting hysterical. for noticing, right? That's our crime. The arrogance of these people is just staggering. That clip was edited to try and suggest and convince us plebs that Orange Man bad, right? Because that is their worldview. They want us to believe and swallow the propaganda that the BBC puts out, and it uses the hard-earned incomes of single mothers, of pensioners, of those who are knocked on the doors of, who happen to be home if they are single mothers, and they get hauled in court to pay for Gary Lineker's news, to pay for this Trump propaganda, to pay for all of these things that actually I think are a moral outrage in 2025. And the Labour Party came out yesterday and they said they are committed to the BBC's licence fee. I mean, it's absurd. They were caught red-handed. Did they all resign in shame? No. They then came out and attacked the man who caught them. They're now blaming a Tory on the board. They found one Tory on the sodden board of the BBC, Robbie Gibb, who used to be in number 10 Downing Street advising the Prime Minister. If memory serves, it was Theresa May, who actually did his job, if the reports are correct, and demanded accountability. He demanded that the BBC actually holds its hands up to the biases that it holds. Now, the BBC mafia have come out and said that actually this makes you a traitor to the cause. Listen to this clip in Parliament. It truly is, by the way, under this Labour Party, a parliament of pygmies.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Robbie Gibb, faithful or traitor?
Perhaps the honourable lady and I can hear her views about that over a few drinks later on.
So that's obviously a play on the BBC's Traitors programme, which I've never watched, by the way, but I know what it is. Now, the traitor demanding the truth here in this scenario, Robbie Gibb, who's been smeared by these people, it is because it's a cult, and the excuses from their mates in the media are utterly pathetic. This is a former BBC presenter. So Sangeeta Miska, she says, if the BBC was a hotbed of left-wing wokery producing systemically biased coverage, Jeremy Corbyn may well have been elected Prime Minister in 2019. It's not. He wasn't, and we got Boris Johnson instead. No, love, nobody watches the bloody BBC news anymore, do they? If the BBC, what a joke, that's their brilliant defence, is it? They cannot see the bloody wood for the trees, because they are... This is bias. This is cultural bias. It's in the water. It's in their blood. It's in their DNA. It's in everything they do. It isn't about Trump. It's systemic. This is the most important point, right? It's not about Trump. It's about their entire woke activist agenda. While they've been busy throwing women under the bus, their own staff have been screaming at them to stop and actually look. So the BBC reported that actually I'll just get that up for you. The Beeb, right? So in parts of this tranche of the dossier showing their systemic biases, there is one article that comes from the Telegraph, and they expose parts of the story in which they ignored the pro-trans bias that's evident in the BBC Sports. Now, I'll show you this. So this person here is Leah Thomas, who went viral for being a swimmer that won medals against women, right? Obviously being biologically male and stronger than the women who were competing against them. And apparently, female staff at the BBC were warning them for 5 years that they're pushing uncritical and celebratory puff pieces on biological men and women's sports. And what happened, according to this dossier? Well, they were ignored. They were unable to voice their opinions. They were fearful. This isn't a newsroom. This is a captured institution. It was quite literally stonewalled. And I mean that in the metaphorical and literal sense, because they had Stonewall advising them, run by a cabal of ideological activists who silence their own staff. But my friends, this is all coming to a beautiful reckoning. The man they tried to frame, none other than the 45th and 47th President of the United States of America, they tried to frame him, and he's about to own the building, right? He's a man who's quite familiar with real estate. And listen to what he had to say for himself on Fox News. He had a sit down with Fox News, and it shows you how global this story has gone, actually, because for the president of the free world to actually be asked about the BBC on national telly within the US is quite the story in and of itself.
Are you going ahead and suing the BBC?
Well, I guess I have to. You know, why not? Because they defrauded the public, and they've admitted it, and their top echelon.
Director General and the CEO
This
both
is
resigned.
within one of our great allies. You know, this is supposedly our great ally, BBC. The government has a chunk of that one, I guess. But that's a pretty sad event. They actually changed my January 6th speech, which was a beautiful speech, which was a very calming speech, and they made it sound radical. And they actually changed it. What they did was rather incredible. They're showing me the results later on, the results of what they did, how they butchered it up. But it was very dishonest, and the head man quit, and a lot of the other people quit.
Yeah, so there you are. He's going for it. £1 billion. And the best part of this whole glorious mess is, well, it shows that there is a route to Trump being able to sue. And I say that, I'm conflicted on this, actually, because I just mentioned the moral bankruptcy at the heart of the BBC's funding model, the licence fee, because it does target single parents. There are mothers who are targeted by the BBC because they happen to be at home when the TV licensing authority shows up at the door and asks why they haven't paid their penneth to the Beeb. Well, the BBC chairman, Samir Shah, has publicly admitted that the edit of Trump was wrong and did give the impression of a direct call for violent action, i.e. they suggested that Trump incited violence. They've handed Trump the loaded gun, and Trump is going to use it. Trump's lawyers, they just need to send an email. The BBC will be forced to use British licence fee money to pay for a settlement to the United States president for their own bent, dishonest journalism. And to top it all off with the sheer pathological irony, the Beeb, which Alison Pearson writes about this morning, while the BBC was in the middle of this scandal about bent editing, they actually dishonestly edited Kemi Badenoch's quote about their editing. I know, it's very meta. You could not make it up. They're crying about a right-wing coup while their lefty mates sneer at GB News. Have a look at this one. They're taking what Kemi said out of context as well. It's quite extraordinary. I think Kemi Badenoch and the Conservative Party are dead and useless, but still, it shows how their bias works, right? But there was an attack on GB News by a Labour MP. He said, if you tune in tonight to Farage and GB News, Nigel Farage will bring you the latest headlines. He doesn't actually. There's a newsreader that brings you the headlines, as is regulated by Ofcom and required by Ofcom. Yes, he's on his very show. Nigel Farage can offer you his unique insights on Nigel Farage. But Jack pointed out on X, we're not forced to pay for GB News. I hope this helps. Exactly, that's the point. Luke Charters is more like Luke Charlatan. One is a choice. The other is a compulsory state broadcasting racket. I know what I'm getting when I watch Nigel Farage on GB News. I do not know what I'm getting when I watch a manufactured, bent, so-called journalistic puff piece on the Beeb. One is a state broadcasting racket that just got caught committing fraud. The other is a fledgling, young, new market entrant that is offering the people of this country a voice. The BBC's fall from grace isn't a tragedy. To me, it's a long overdue public service. I do not wish them well, and Donald J. Trump will have to watch how this baby plays out. Right, now, all of you, my friends, Rosie says the BBC ignored the Christian genocides. Yet, Rosie, there is currently, I said earlier that actually Nicki Minaj, the rapper, the pop rapper, has actually done a better job at highlighting the plight of Nigerian Christians more than our broadcasters and politicians. William says the licence fee payer is technically paying Trump's billion. Yep. Gray says the right-thinking people of Britain support the 47th President of the United States. Our government and its propagandist BBC do not. Anna said it was absolutely shocking how they could do that in an election year. Mentally corrupt. I agree. And Mr. Smith says, when the BBC lied about their facts, such as gender-promoted extremists, and got caught again, we switched off. Trump must not back down, and I worked with Stonewall. Yeah, well, you know a thing or two about them. And Rosie says, Darren, thank you for giving us a voice. That's very kind, Rosie. BBC has been horribly, horribly anti-Christian for years. Can't stand their London bubble arrogance. Absolutely right. Now, I have to talk to you about this fella. I'm sorry, but I've got to do it. I've got to do it. Ed Miliband, right? You might not know this, but there is currently a CON conference. Oh, sorry, I meant a COP conference, which is a climate conference organised by the United Nations, one of these globalist multinational institutions. Ed Miliband flew there for the start of that conference, right? So he flew out there to Brazil. It ain't exactly around the corner. This ain't a trip to Belfast. So he flew to Brazil and he came back again. You might think, oh, come on, Grimesy. That's all right, isn't it? He's a government minister. He's got to go to these things. Maybe you think me unfair if I suggest that he could have done it by a Teams link or a Zoom call. But he actually went twice in 2 weeks. A round trip twice in 2 weeks. That's 12,000 miles in 2 weeks. This from the man that says that there is a climate emergency and that the globe is at risk of burning and total collapse of biodiversity. You could not make it up. If you want to know what the liberal left really think about their net zero project, you have to look at their actions, not what they say, look at what they do, not what they say. This is beyond parody. The esteemed Energy Secretary, the man pushing net zero billions onto your taxes, Red Ed Miliband, the man who hit other headlines showing he has a plot to hit you with that £100 boiler tax, and whose eco team has taken 1,600 flights in a year. He's got a bit of a travel bug, hasn't he? He likes flying around the globe to talk to all of his globalist mates about making the British people both colder and poorer, while China burns more sodding coal than Sauron's Mordor in Lord of the Rings. He had to fly 12,000 miles to Brazil alongside the Prince of Wales, lecturing us from a sodden palace on our carbon emissions. He flew to Brazil for the COP30 Climate Jamboree, and then he flew all those miles back. Then he flew back to Brazil and back again. That's £22,000 of your money. That's 6 tons of CO2 carbon emissions from one man that emits hot gas from his mouth, lecturing all of us on how we need to cut down on our CO2 in just 2 weeks, to go to a conference to lecture the world about saving the planet. But don't you worry, they've plenty for global climate aid of your money to send abroad. We just paid for a road to be built through a rainforest in the name of climate aid, when actually it's being used by businesses to actually grow their business outlet and economy over there. A source insisted that a summit of this scale just wouldn't work on Teams or Zoom. It would be chaos, absolute chaos. Oh, well, imagine the horror. The rest of us had to run our businesses, our schools, and our family lives on Zoom for 2 years while your Labour Party kept calling us to be locked down every 2 sodden minutes. But for the global climate elite that warn us of the dangers of imminent threat of drowning or burning under climate change, well, that's a step too far for them. The poor dears need their flights on their comfortable jets. They need to be in the room together to pat each other on the back and say what a good job they've done at ripping off the world's taxpayers. Face to face, apart from the Chinese taxpayers, face to face to tell the rest of us to stop travelling. Your one measly holiday a year, your meat, your reduction of the cost of your food shop, none of that is worthy of you, only of our well-off elite. A spokesperson said the emissions would be offset. You know, offset, that's the magic word, isn't it? It's the 21st century indulgence. It's the get-out-of-jail-free card for the hypocritical and crass liberal elite. It's how they justify their globe-trotting, taxpayer-funded lifestyles while telling you to rip out your perfectly good boiler in the name of some sodden heat pump that doesn't work. I fart more warm air than a bloody heat pump can. This isn't about saving the planet. It's about being seen to save their egos and their virtue signalling. It's the oldest story in the book. One rule for the socialist elite, a totally different one for the rest of us. They get first class flights. You get the bill for them. You get the bill for their climate change plans. You get the bill for their net zero hypocrisy. You are left colder and poorer. But Red Ed up there in the air, he'll be quite all right. I wonder if he had a nice, refreshing glass of champers at the taxpayer's expense. Now, staying with matters green and zany, this is the deputy leader of the Green Party, right? And you're not going to believe this one, right? Because not only are they eco-nuts like Ed Miliband, but they are also open borders extremists. And this is the moment we've all been waiting for. It's the punchline to the entire migrant crisis. Because these open border nut jobs at the Green Party, well, they've suddenly joined our call for border controls. Why? Well, because the border finally arrived in their wealthy, leafy backyards. You could not make it up. They say, we need open borders, we need more migrants to come here. But when you put them in their communities, all of a sudden they fear for their safety, they fear for their children, they fear for their communities. Ah, quelle sodding surprise! This is Wealden, right? Wealden. And the eco-zealot hypocrites, the Green Lib Dem Alliance running Wealden District Council, just discovered that the Home Office wanted to house 600 male asylum seekers in a local military camp in Crowborough. Now, if you're from Crowborough, I'm with you. I'm with you on this assault and impertinence being foisted upon your community by a Labour government that cannot control our borders. But it is rich that the elected officials that you voted for, the Greenies, the open border Greenies and Lib Dems, suddenly all that refugees are welcome here, open my borders, stretch them wide. All of a sudden, that nonsense has vanished. The hypocrisy is so thick, you could build a wall with it, right? You could cement it across and meet Sir Keir Starmer's housing targets for all of his new migrant mates, Copenhagen. First of all, the council itself, the Green Lib Dem Alliance, it hasn't bothered to host a single public meeting about this because they know that it's totally contradictory to their national messaging. They left that to the local Tory MP, Nusrat Ghani, and wait for it. The Reform Party, you heard of them? We're the ones on the ground, as usual. The council meeting was a masterclass in chaos. It was a total shambles. At the start of this meeting, the Green councillor said, no legal action. Our barrister says we cannot win. And then halfway through, the deputy leader of the Green Party, who's this lass on your screen here, she says, well, we'll consider taking action because by the end of the meeting, after 3 grueling hours of getting a total pasting and an earful from very angry, understandably so, residents, they said, we intend to take legal action. It was a total U-turn. They were like green rats in a sack, rats up a drain pipe. They went from total surrender to revolution against this Labour government's open borders, migrant madness, zealotry in just 3 hours. They don't have a plan. They're just terrified of the people that they're supposed to actually represent. But the best part here is that they complained that taking legal action costs money. You think, how much do you think it sudden well cost to house these so-called asylum seekers? I'll tell you, it's tens of billions. This is the same council, the Green Lib Dem Alliance, whose Green deputy leader, that Rachel Millward, look at her, middle class as you can see. She grandly launched a new project for £450,000. Now, what did she do? Was this to protect the community? Was this to hire more police? No, it was to celebrate Winnie the Pooh's 100th birthday. At least the migrants coming over to live in her leafy part of the world will get to celebrate Winnie the Pooh, eh? I'm sure that's right up their street. So let's get this straight. They've got £500,000 for a sodden teddy bear, but not a penny to protect their own residents from a failed Home Office coup and their policies putting us all at risk. You couldn't make it up. The Green Deputy Leader, Rachel Millward, a real woman of the people. She lives in a £1.6 million 6-bedroom house with a swimming pool. Maybe we could get some migrants moving in with her, eh? Where was she when the Home Office was announcing the plans that are terrifying their residents? Well, she was on holiday, sunning herself. The absolute definition of the liberal left elite. I wonder if she'll say she was offsetting our carbon emissions. They virtue signal from their mansions, they fly off on holiday, and they leave the rest of us to deal with the consequences of their ideology. But if you need one final killer fact, well, here it is. Because the same local Green Party that is now being ridiculed for opposing this camp is the same party that was campaigning to designate the entire of East Sussex. I don't know if any of you are in East Sussex, but I'd be worried if I was. They want to designate it, the entire county, as a county of sanctuary for migrants. So congratulations, I say to the Green Party. You got your wish. Your sanctuary's moving in next door. But no, you don't like that, do you? Because the sanctuary, you thought it wouldn't be in your town, did you? You thought it would be in deprived communities in the likes of Durham, in Dumfries. You thought that actually you could get away with it from your 1.6 million house with a pool in a nice leafy neighbourhood. This is the classic, shameless, not in my backyard of the Open Borders Brigade. They're all for it. They love the diversity. They love the multiculturalism until it moves in next door, until it affects them. They're not Greens, they ought to be red with hypocrisy, red flushed with the shame of the British people calling them out for what they are. If you vote for the Green Party or the Lib Dems, then I'm afraid to say you deserve what you're getting. I'm sorry, I have absolute sympathy with the British public in challenging this undemocratic menace forced upon us, despite the fact that we consistently vote for border controls. We get the opposite. But if you vote for the Green and Lib Dems that are pro these things because you think it's the nice thing, liberal, lovely, soft, cuddly thing to do, well, you deserve what you get. And what you get is unvetted men moving in next door to you. They're not Greens, they're shameless, hypocritical phonies. And the sooner that the young people of this country see them for what they are, destroying the futures of the youth of this country, then they are lost. They are a lost cause. And it shows what the propaganda of the education system, the BBC, the media have actually done to this nation's young people. But this is the Green Party exposed. This is the hypocrisy of the Green elite exposed. And I love to see it. I really, really do. Just a Brit says you can't spell hypocrite without a Labour MP in it. Well, there we are. Gray says, why did they need to go to the COP conference instead of doing teleconferencing? It's a good point. Not for you to know says, we should feel bad for driving our cars and heating our homes, but it's fine for him to fly around everywhere on a private jet. Yeah, that's about Ed Miliband, of course. And William says he wants to ban log burners as well. Yep, it's screwing over those in the country, of course, too. And Anne says, this is the issue with the elites in their ivory towers. They won't suffer. It's those pensioners who are watching the likes of the BBC and others that will suffer as a consequence. I couldn't agree with you all more. I really, really couldn't. Right, my friends, I'm going to have to go because I have to pop to London, unfortunately. But I will be championing the case and the cause that we all believe in, that we stand for, calling out what needs to happen. But we've got to get ready because, as I say, I believe that this has been a turning point. This week has been a turning point. I think that this government is more vulnerable than it has been in many years and more vulnerable than the Tory party was in 10 years. So it shows the absolute systemic rot at the heart of this government. I am more optimistic than ever before that there will be a collapse before 2029 and that Reform UK needs to be ready to step in and fill the void of a patriotic, common sense alternative that stands up for you in everything from the economy to our borders to our energy policies. We need to be on your side. We need to be ready. I'll be making that case and championing our cause. Thank you so very much for your support. Please do hit that like button. Please do hit subscribe if you haven't already. And don't worry, if you miss Chloe Dobbs, she will be back. She does post every single day, most days, and she has done a phenomenal job. I know some of you love her very, very much, as I do too. And I will see you very soon indeed. Okay, thanks very much, guys. Have a good day.